What if the person you love most suddenly stopped speaking? What if the only thing standing between them and their deepest fear was a dog? This is a story of loss, resilience, and an unlikely hero. A scarred Pitbull named Maximus. A father broken by tragedy. A daughter trapped in silence. And a dog carrying wounds of his own. But sometimes healing comes from the most unexpected places. Stay until the very end, because this story holds a lesson you won't forget. And if it moves you, subscribe to Veil Marks. Your support fuels these stories, bringing them to life for thousands to experience. Now, let's begin. Logan Carter had once been a man of certainty, a man of order, a protector. For years, he had served as a dedicated police officer, the kind who saw justice as something worth fighting for, something worth bleeding for. His moral compass had always been unwavering, his instincts sharp, his hands steady. But grief had a way of stripping a man down to his bones, reducing even the strongest into a shadow of who they once were. And Logan, he was nothing but a ghost now. 2 years ago, his world had been shattered beyond repair. The night still haunted him, replaying in a relentless loop in his mind. Clara had kissed him goodbye before heading out for a late-night drive. She had told him she wouldn't be long, but she never came back. The call had come just after midnight, a fatal car accident. A highway guardrail mangled beyond recognition. The vehicle, her vehicle, had flipped 3 times before slamming into a ravine. No witnesses, no signs of foul play, just a tragic, senseless accident. That was what the official report had said, but Logan had never believed it. Something didn't add up. The skid marks on the road weren't right. The impact didn't match the speed limit of that stretch of highway. And Clara, she had been meticulous, careful. She wasn't reckless. She wasn't the type to make a mistake behind the wheel. The department dismissed his suspicions. His colleagues, the very men he had trusted with his life, had looked at him with something that bordered on pity. Sometimes bad things just happen, Carter, they had told him. You have to let it go. But Logan couldn't. He pored over every detail, every angle, every photograph. He demanded forensic re-examinations. He harassed detectives and traffic analysts. He even visited the crash site himself more times than he could count, kneeling in the dirt, running his fingers over the cold metal remains of the guardrail, searching for an answer that no one else seemed to care about. The obsession cost him everything. The sleepless nights turned into missed shifts. The anger turned into fights. The department grew tired of his relentless insistence that something wasn't right. When his temper finally boiled over during an interrogation of a suspect in an unrelated case, the chief had no choice but to suspend him. At first, Logan thought it was temporary. He thought they'd reinstate him once they saw the truth, once he proved that Clara's death wasn't an accident. But the department's patience had long since run out. His badge was taken, his gun was confiscated. The career that had once defined him was gone, just like his wife. All he had left was Olivia. She was only 3 when Clara died. Too young to fully understand the weight of the loss, but old enough to sense the shift in their world. In the beginning, she would ask about her mother constantly. When is Mommy coming home? Why hasn't Mommy tucked me in tonight? Logan would hold her tight, pressing kisses into her soft curls, whispering reassurances that burned like acid on his tongue. Mommy's in heaven, baby. But Daddy's here. I'll always be here. But as months passed, Olivia stopped asking. Logan told himself that was a good thing, that maybe, in her own way, she was healing. But the truth was, nothing felt whole anymore. The house felt empty. The warmth, the laughter, the life, it had all vanished with Clara. Logan tried to hold things together for Olivia's sake. He did his best to keep the routines normal, school drop-offs, bedtime stories, Saturday morning pancakes. But his grief was a living thing, a parasite that clung to him, hollowing him out from the inside. Then, the nightmares began. Some nights, He would jolt awake, drenched in sweat, the sound of screeching tires echoing in his skull. Other nights, he dreamt of Clara standing at the foot of their bed, her lips parting as if to speak, but no words coming out. And worse, some nights he dreamt of Olivia being taken from him too. That was his greatest fear, losing her. So he became paranoid, overprotective. He memorized every person in their neighborhood. He double-checked the locks 3 times before bed. He never let Olivia out of his sight for too long, never let her go on play dates without him being nearby. She was the last piece of his world that still mattered, and he refused to let anything happen to her. But fate had other plans. That afternoon in the park had seemed ordinary at first. The crisp autumn air, the golden leaves crunching beneath Olivia's sneakers, her laughter bubbling up as she chased a butterfly near the swings. Logan had been watching from a distance, as he always did. Then he saw the man, tall, lean, dressed in dark jeans and a plain gray hoodie. Nothing about him screamed immediate danger, except for the way his gaze never wavered from Olivia. Logan's instincts, dulled by exhaustion but never fully gone, sent alarms blaring in his mind. He sat up straighter on the bench, his muscles tensing. The man moved. He walked toward Olivia with a casual confidence, hands in his pockets. When he was just a few feet away, he pulled out a stuffed teddy bear, golden brown, its button eyes glinting in the sunlight. Logan's heart slammed against his ribs. "Hey there, sweetheart," the man said, voice smooth, practiced. "I saw you playing all by yourself. Thought you might like a new friend." Olivia hesitated. Logan was already moving, his breath tight in his chest, boots crunching against the gravel path. Then the man crouched down, his smile widening. "I've got even more stuffed animals in my car," he said. "And puppies, too. You like puppies, don't you?" The world narrowed to a razor-sharp edge. Olivia reached out, just slightly, her tiny fingers twitching toward the bear. Logan's pulse roared in his ears. Then, "Hey, get away from that child!" The voice, sharp, unwavering, belonged to an elderly woman sitting on a nearby bench. For the first time, the man hesitated. That second of uncertainty was all it took. Olivia wrenched her hand back. Logan lunged, but before he could reach her, the man bolted, vanishing between the trees. Logan skidded to his knees, wrapping Olivia in his arms. He could feel her heart hammering against his chest, her breath coming in sharp, shallow gasps. She was safe. But then, Logan pulled back and looked into her face. His stomach dropped. Her lips parted slightly, her mouth trembling. But no sound came. Not a single word. The silence was deafening. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and distant chimney smoke. Logan Carter sat on the weathered park bench, his back straight, his eyes fixed on one person, Olivia. She was his entire world, the last piece of his life that still made sense. She twirled near the swings, golden curls bouncing with every step, her laughter once the sweetest sound he had ever known. But Logan didn't smile. He didn't relax. His hand gripped the armrest of the bench a little too tightly, his body coiled like a spring, ready to react. He had been this way ever since Clara's death, ever since he learned how quickly life could take everything from him. And now, after what had nearly happened, he couldn't let his guard down. Not even for a second. That afternoon, he had noticed him almost instantly. The man had lingered too long by the edge of the playground, just beyond the trees where the light began to fade. He wasn't watching the other children. He wasn't checking his phone. His gaze was locked on Olivia. Logan's heartbeat spiked, his grip tightening as he sat forward, muscles tensed. He scanned the park, parents chatting, kids chasing each other across the grass. No one else seemed to notice the stranger. No one else seemed to sense the shift in the air, the invisible thread of unease winding tighter with every second. Then the man moved. He walked toward Olivia with a casual confidence, his hands tucked into the pockets of his dark hoodie. Logan's body went rigid. but he forced himself to wait. Rushing in too soon could scare Olivia, or worse, make her run in the wrong direction. He needed to be smart. He needed to be fast. The man crouched down a few feet from Olivia, pulling something from his pocket, a plush teddy bear, golden brown with button eyes that gleamed in the late afternoon sun. His smile was warm, friendly, rehearsed. "Hey there, sweetheart," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "I saw you playing all by yourself. Thought you might like a new friend." Olivia hesitated. Her tiny fingers curled around the hem of her dress, her blue eyes darting from the man's face to the bear in his outstretched hands. Logan's pulse pounded. She had always been shy around strangers, always looking to him for reassurance. But today, she was just far enough away that she couldn't see him watching. Just far enough away that she might make the wrong choice. Then the man leaned in slightly, lowering his voice as if sharing a special secret. "I have more stuffed animals in my car," he whispered. "And puppies, too. You like puppies, don't you?" Logan was already on his feet, his breath sharp, his vision tunneling. But before he could reach her, the man's hand shot out, fingers closing around Olivia's delicate wrist. Panic flashed across her face. For a single frozen second, everything stood still. Logan's body moved on instinct, a growl tearing from his throat as he charged forward, closing the distance between them with terrifying speed. The man flinched at the sudden movement, his grip loosening just enough. Then, a sharp, commanding voice cut through the air. "Hey! Get away from that child!" It was an older woman sitting nearby, her small terrier barking wildly at the scene. Her glare was fierce, her phone already in hand. That moment of hesitation was all Olivia needed. She yanked her arm free and stumbled backward, falling onto the soft grass. Logan reached her just as the man bolted, vanishing between the trees. Logan dropped to his knees, his arms wrapping protectively around Olivia's trembling frame. He could feel her tiny heart hammering against his chest, her breath coming in short, rapid bursts. He rocked her slightly, his hands running over her arms, her back, checking for any harm. "It's okay, baby," he murmured, pressing his lips against her hair. "I've got you. You're safe. I've got you." But as he pulled back, as he looked into her face, his own breath caught. Olivia's lips were parted slightly, her mouth trembling as if trying to form a word. But nothing came out. Not a sound. Her blue eyes, usually so full of life, were distant, frozen. A void where laughter had once lived. Logan cupped her face, his thumbs gently brushing against her soft skin. "Olivia?" His voice cracked, fear digging its claws into his chest. "Baby, talk to me." Silence. The world around them faded, the shouts of other children, the wind rustling through the trees, the distant hum of passing cars. None of it mattered. Because the worst had already happened. His daughter had retreated into herself, locked away behind an invisible wall. A wall Logan didn't know how to break through. That night, Olivia didn't say a word. Not when he carried her to the truck, buckled her into her seat, and drove home in silence. Not when he tucked her into bed, smoothing the blanket over her small frame. Not when he sat beside her, waiting, praying for something, anything. But there was nothing. No whispered goodnight, no request for a bedtime story, just the stillness of a child who had vanished inside herself. Days passed and the silence remained. Logan tried everything. He played her favorite songs, read her the stories she once begged him to read again and again. He made her favorite pancakes, cutting them into little bear shapes like Clara used to do. He sat with her for hours, talking softly, telling her she was safe, that the bad man was gone. But Olivia only stared ahead unblinking, unreachable. Doctors called it selective mutism, a response to trauma. They said she needed time, security, patience. But Logan wasn't patient. He wasn't built to sit back and wait for answers. And yet, For the first time in his life, he had no other choice. So he did the only thing he could. He stayed by her side. Every morning he walked her to school, holding her tiny hand in his larger one, feeling the weight of everything unsaid between them. Every night he sat outside her room, listening for the sound of her voice, for anything that would tell him she was coming back to him. But night after night, the silence pressed in. Cold. Suffocating. Logan had thought losing Clara had broken him. But watching his daughter slip away, watching the light in her eyes dim with every passing day, this was a different kind of pain, a kind that no amount of anger, no amount of justice could ever fix. And so he waited, praying that one day Olivia would find her way back to him, praying that the silence wouldn't last forever. The days stretched into weeks, and the silence remained. It filled every corner of the house, seeping into the walls, wrapping around Logan's chest like an iron grip that refused to loosen. No matter what he did, no matter how hard he tried, Olivia would not speak. He had once been a man who found solutions, a detective who could unravel the most tangled cases, who could see through the lies, read between the lines, and piece together the truth. But this was different. This wasn't a case to be solved. This was his daughter, his flesh and blood, slipping further away from him, and he didn't know how to bring her back. Logan tried everything. He took her to specialists, child psychologists with warm voices and soft smiles, therapists who assured him that healing took time. They spoke about trauma, about how a child's mind protected itself by shutting down. They offered books, coping exercises, gentle encouragements. Olivia only stared at them with empty blue eyes. At home, he surrounded her with things she used to love, her favorite bedtime stories, the stuffed rabbit Clara had given her on her 3rd birthday, the twinkling fairy lights she had once insisted on keeping in her room. He played her favorite songs, even danced around the living room like a fool, hoping for the tiniest giggle, the slightest sign that she was still there beneath the silence. Nothing. He made her pancakes shaped like teddy bears, just like Clara used to, flipping them onto her plate with a hopeful smile. Olivia picked at the edges but never spoke a word. Each failed attempt chipped away at him. One evening, he found himself sitting on the floor outside her bedroom door, his head resting against the wood, listening to the steady rhythm of her breathing. He used to love that sound, the soft, peaceful proof that his daughter was safe, that she was home. Now, it was the only thing anchoring him in place, the only thing reminding him that she was still there, even if she felt 1,000,000 miles away. He closed his eyes, exhaustion pressing heavy on his shoulders. "I don't know how to fix this, baby," he whispered, not expecting an answer. "I don't know what to do." The silence answered him. Logan had thought losing Clara had been the worst pain he could endure. He had thought nothing could hurt more than standing in a cemetery, gripping the edge of a coffin, knowing that the woman he loved was inside. He had thought that was the moment that had broken him. But he had been wrong. This was worse. Watching Olivia withdraw into herself, watching her tiny hands fidget but never reaching for him, watching her lips part slightly, as if a word was about to form, only to close again. This was a pain unlike any other. Because he was here, she was right in front of him, but he couldn't reach her. The nights were the hardest. In the darkness, when the world quieted, the weight of it all pressed down on him. Sleep was a foreign thing, something he barely grasped before waking in a cold sweat, his mind tormented by the memory of that afternoon in the park. He should have seen it coming. He should have been faster. He should have... His fist clenched against his knee. The anger simmered beneath the grief, tangled with his guilt, until he didn't know where one ended and the other began. But rage couldn't fix this. It couldn't bring Olivia back. So he kept trying. Each morning, he walked her to school, her tiny hand fitting into his like it always had. He used to love these moments, the way she would chatter about her dreams, her favorite cartoons, how she would ask him a million questions about the world, questions he never had the right answers to but tried anyway. Now, the walk was silent. The teachers were patient, kind. They told him Olivia was adjusting, that she was engaging in activities but never speaking. Other children tried to talk to her, to invite her into their games, but she remained on the outskirts, always observing, never participating. Logan wished she would scream, cry, throw something, anything but this empty silence. He drove home in the late hours of the night, when the city streets were quiet, when the memories were loudest. The badge that had once defined him sat in a locked drawer now, collecting dust, useless. What good was he as a cop, as a father, as a man, if he couldn't even protect his own daughter from the ghosts in her mind? He pulled into the driveway but didn't get out. Instead, he sat there, gripping the steering wheel, staring at the house that no longer felt like home. A single lamp glowed from Olivia's bedroom window. She was still awake. Logan exhaled slowly, pressing his forehead against the wheel. "Come back to me, baby," he whispered. "Please." But as he stepped inside, as he climbed the stairs and peeked into Olivia's room, he knew the truth. She was there, right in front of him, and yet she was gone. The waiting room at the Midland Rehabilitation Center for Rescue Animals was quiet, filled with the faint hum of an old ceiling fan and the distant sounds of barking from the back kennels. Logan Carter sat stiffly in the plastic chair, arms crossed over his chest, his jaw clenched so tightly it ached. This was a mistake. He wasn't supposed to be here. He had spent the last few weeks knocking on every door that promised help for Olivia, doctors, therapists, specialists who spoke in soft voices and reassured him that healing took time. Time. He hated that word. Time wasn't fixing anything. It wasn't bringing Olivia back. Now he was sitting in an animal rescue center because a well-meaning psychologist had suggested animal-assisted therapy. The idea felt absurd. Olivia didn't need a dog. She needed her voice back. Still, he was here. Because at this point, Logan would try anything. A woman in a blue polo shirt, Rachel, the center's program director, walked in with a warm smile. "Mr. Carter, thank you for coming." She glanced down at Olivia, who sat beside him, small and quiet, her tiny hands folded in her lap. "And hello, Olivia." Olivia didn't respond, didn't even look up. Rachel didn't push. Instead, she turned back to Logan. "We have a few therapy-certified rescues, but there's one in particular I'd like you both to meet. Follow me." Logan hesitated, then rose to his feet, gently guiding Olivia with him. Her small fingers barely clung to his. They walked down a hallway lined with kennels. Some of the dogs wagged their tails excitedly as they passed, noses pressed against the bars, eyes filled with hope. But when Rachel led them into a separate, quieter room, Logan immediately knew this was different. Inside, lying on a thick orthopedic bed, was Maximus. A large Pitbull. His muscular frame was covered in a short, brindle coat, a long, jagged scar running from his left shoulder down to his ribs. He didn't leap up excitedly like the others. He didn't bark for attention. Instead, he lifted his head, his deep brown eyes calm, assessing. Logan had seen eyes like that before, on men who had been through hell and survived to tell the tale. Rachel knelt beside Maximus, scratching gently behind his ears. "He's a special one," she said softly. "Maximus was rescued from an illegal dogfighting ring. He was forced to fight for years, used, abused. But even after everything, he never turned aggressive. He never lost his heart." Logan swallowed hard, his gaze locked on the scar running down Maximus's side. He knew what it was like to carry a wound that didn't heal properly. "He was trained to fight," Rachel continued, "but he never wanted to. He only fought because he had no choice. When he was finally rescued, his previous owner abandoned him, leaving him to die from his injuries. But he survived." Logan exhaled slowly. "And now?" Rachel smiled. "Now, he helps others heal. He's been part of our therapy program for a year. He has a way of knowing who needs him." Logan turned to Olivia. She hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, but something in her posture had changed. She was staring at Maximus, her small fingers curled tightly into the fabric of her sweater. Rachel seemed to notice, too. "Would you like to meet him, Olivia?" The little girl hesitated. Then, cautiously, she stepped forward. Maximus didn't move. He stayed perfectly still, his eyes never leaving her. He didn't wag his tail, didn't lunge forward. He simply waited. A long silence stretched between them. Then, Olivia reached out. Her tiny hand, trembling, extended toward Maximus's scar. She didn't touch his face, didn't stroke his ears. Instead, she let her fingers rest gently along the jagged line of old pain. Maximus didn't flinch. He let her. Logan's throat tightened. Rachel's voice was barely above a whisper. "It's like she understands him." Logan could only nod, because for the first time in weeks, Olivia wasn't withdrawing. She wasn't frozen in silence, trapped in her own mind. She was reaching out. She wasn't just seeing a dog. She was seeing someone who had been hurt, who had suffered, who had lost something, but survived anyway. Maximus let out a deep exhale, his body relaxing under her small touch. And then, so softly it was barely noticeable, Olivia did something Logan hadn't seen her do in weeks. She leaned forward and rested her forehead gently against Maximus's side. No words, no sounds, just the quiet understanding between two souls who knew what it meant to be broken. Rachel wiped at the corner of her eye. "I think we found her match." Logan swallowed against the lump in his throat. Maybe, just maybe, Olivia had found her way back to something. Or someone. And for the first time since that awful day in the park, Logan felt a flicker of something he hadn't dared to hope for. A flicker of hope. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with anticipation. Rows of spectators sat in stiff-backed chairs, murmuring among themselves as they waited for the trial to begin. The judge's gavel had yet to sound, but tension already crackled in the air like an oncoming storm. At the defense table, Martin Crow leaned back in his chair, adjusting the cuffs of his tailored suit. He wore a smirk, the kind that suggested he was in complete control, that he believed this trial was nothing more than a formality. He was confident, too confident. Logan Carter sat on the opposite side of the courtroom, his fists clenched on his lap. His gaze flickered to Olivia, seated beside him, her small frame swallowed by the large chair. She hadn't spoken in weeks. She was the key witness, but in the eyes of the law, a silent child meant nothing. And Crow knew it. His lawyer stood, buttoning his jacket before addressing the jury with a measured, authoritative tone. "Ladies and gentlemen, let's be clear about what this case is lacking," he said, pacing slowly. "There is no forensic evidence linking my client to the alleged crime. There are no reliable eyewitness accounts. And most importantly," he turned, looking directly at Olivia, his voice laced with manufactured sympathy. "The only person who could claim to have seen my client that day cannot speak." Logan's jaw tensed. He wanted to lunge across the room, to wipe that smug expression off Crow's face, but he forced himself to stay still. Olivia needed him to be steady. The defense attorney took a step closer to Olivia, tilting his head. "This little girl, this poor, traumatized child, has not uttered a single word since the incident. Are we really prepared to convict a man based on the silence of a child?" He let the question hang in the air, letting the jury absorb the weight of his words. Logan felt his stomach twist. Damn them. Damn them for trying to use Olivia's pain against her. Then Crow himself stood. Slowly, deliberately, he walked toward the witness stand, his expression carefully controlled. "You know, it's tragic, really," he mused. "She's just a scared little girl, too frightened to know what she saw. Isn't that right, sweetheart?" He took another step forward. Logan's entire body went rigid. "And then," Maximus growled. The deep, primal sound rolled through the silent courtroom like distant thunder, low and menacing. Every head turned toward the massive Pitbull sitting obediently at Olivia's feet. His ears were pinned back, his muscles coiled, his gaze locked on Crow with unrelenting intensity. The smirk on Crow's face wavered. Logan knew that look. Fear. Maximus didn't just dislike Crow, he recognized him. The courtroom held its breath. "Control your animal," the defense attorney snapped, his voice sharper now. Maximus didn't move. He remained rooted in place, staring Crow down like he was nothing more than prey. And then, Olivia moved. For the first time since that terrible day in the park, she lifted her hand and pointed a trembling finger directly at Martin Crow. A ripple of gasps spread through the room. The prosecutor wasted no time. "Let the record show that the witness has just identified the defendant." The judge nodded, taking it in. "Proceed." Crow's attorney quickly interjected, "Your Honor, this proves nothing. A dog's reaction is hardly admissible evidence." "I disagree," the prosecutor interrupted smoothly. "Maximus was there that day, and it's not just a random reaction. This is recognition." Logan's heart pounded. This was it, the moment they needed. The prosecutor turned to a detective sitting at the evidence table. "Detective, do we have anything from the crime scene that can corroborate this?" The detective nodded and lifted a small sealed plastic bag. "We collected the defendant's shoes upon arrest. We ran an analysis and found traces of an industrial solvent, one used specifically in old manufacturing plants and abandoned warehouses." A beat of silence. Then the prosecutor continued, his voice gaining momentum. "And do we know of any such locations that might be relevant to this case?" "Yes." The detective glanced at Logan, then back at the judge. "There's an abandoned warehouse near the outskirts of town, a location that fits the profile of past missing child cases." The defense attorney scoffed. "This is all circumstantial. You have no proof that this warehouse—" "That's where they were keeping them," Olivia's voice cut through the room. Silence. Dead silence. The courtroom froze. Logan's breath hitched. Slowly, carefully, he turned to Olivia. Her blue eyes, once empty, now burned with something new, something fierce. She spoke again, clearer this time. "That's where they took the others." A stunned murmur spread through the crowd. Crow's face lost its color. The prosecutor wasted no time. "Your Honor, based on this new testimony and the forensic evidence, we request an immediate warrant to search the warehouse." The judge's gavel struck down. "Granted." Crow stood abruptly, his hands shaking as he turned to his attorney. His confidence, his arrogance, was gone. Logan exhaled, his chest tightening with a mix of relief and something else. Pride. Olivia had spoken. She had faced the man who had taken everything from her, and she had found her voice again. The courtroom buzzed with energy, officers already moving to secure the search. But Logan didn't care about any of that. He turned to Olivia, crouching down beside her, his voice low. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart." She looked up at him, her eyes softer now, a little less afraid. She reached out, small fingers wrapping around his hand. And then, just as quietly as before, she whispered, "Max told me I could." Logan's throat tightened, and he ran a gentle hand through her hair. Maybe this wasn't just Olivia finding her strength. Maybe Maximus had given it back to her. The night was thick with tension, the air damp with the scent of rain that hadn't yet fallen. The abandoned warehouse loomed like a forgotten relic, its rusted walls and broken windows swallowed by the darkness. Flashing red and blue lights illuminated the area as FBI agents moved swiftly, forming a perimeter around the building. Logan Carter stood at the edge of it all, his pulse hammering in his ears. His body buzzed with adrenaline, every muscle coiled, ready to move. He had been in high-stakes situations before. Years on the force had hardened him for moments like these. But this wasn't just another bust. This wasn't about a case. This was about the children. And more than that, this was about Olivia. She had found her voice in that courtroom, and now he had to be the one to finish this. Beside him, Maximus stood still, his brindle coat rippling under the dim light. His ears twitched, nose flaring as he sniffed the air, sensing something the human agents couldn't. He was locked in, focused, his body vibrating with restrained energy. Rachel, the rescue center's director, had warned Logan that Maximus had once been trained to fight, that somewhere inside him there was a part that knew combat, knew danger. But what she hadn't told him, what no one could have known, was that Maximus was born to protect. An agent gave the final hand signal, and the team prepared to move in. Then Maximus lunged forward. "Max!" Logan hissed, but the dog wasn't waiting for permission. He charged toward the warehouse with a speed and precision that stunned even the seasoned FBI agents. But Logan knew. Maximus wasn't running blindly. He had found them. A sharp bark echoed through the night, one meant to alert, to signal. Logan's gut clenched. "Move! Move! Move!" The tactical team surged forward, battering rams slamming into the rusted metal doors. The hinges shrieked in protest before snapping open. Then, chaos. The inside of the warehouse was a maze of old storage containers, the stench of oil and decay thick in the air. Logan's boots pounded against the concrete as he rushed inside, weapon drawn, scanning for movement. But Maximus had already cut through the confusion. The dog weaved through the crates, his nose locked onto a single target: fear. And then Logan heard it. A child's muffled sob. Maximus stopped at the farthest container, barking furiously, his paws scratching against the metal. Logan reached him in seconds, dropping to his knees and pressing his ear against the side. Soft cries. More than one. Oh, God. "They're in here!" Logan yelled. An agent rushed forward with bolt cutters, slicing through the heavy chains wrapped around the handles. The door groaned open, revealing 6 terrified children huddled together, their faces streaked with dirt and tears. One little girl, no older than 6, clung to an older boy's arm. Her lip trembled as she stared up at Logan, eyes wide with fear. "It's okay," he said, his voice softer now, urgent but reassuring. "We're here to take you home." The oldest boy hesitated, shielding the younger ones with his arms. "They said no one would come," he whispered. "They said no one cared." Maximus stepped forward, lowering his head as if to tell them otherwise. The smallest child, barely more than a toddler, reached a shaky hand toward the dog's scarred face. Maximus let her. That was all it took. One by one, the children crawled forward, their fragile bodies finally moving toward safety. Logan scooped one of the younger ones into his arms, pressing the boy's small frame against his chest. "You're safe now," he murmured. "I promise." More agents flooded in, securing the area, clearing out the rest of the facility. Logan barely registered the arrests happening around him. His world had shrunk down to the children, to the sound of their cries mixing with the relief of being found. He turned, searching for Maximus. The dog wasn't celebrating. He was still searching. And then, Maximus froze. His entire body tensed, ears pricked forward. A low growl rumbled from deep in his chest. Logan knew that sound. Before he could react, a shadow moved from behind the crates. A man, not just any man, the last remaining captor. His hand moved toward his waistband, a weapon. "Maximus, go!" Logan shouted. The Pitbull lunged. A flash of silver, a knife, gleamed under the harsh lights. But Maximus was faster. His powerful jaws locked onto the man's arm, clamping down with unrelenting force. The man screamed, dropping the blade as Maximus dragged him to the ground, pinning him there with sheer strength. Logan was on him in seconds, kicking the weapon away and snapping the cuffs onto his wrists. "You're done," he growled. Maximus didn't let go until Logan gave the order. Only then did the dog step back, his chest heaving, his eyes still locked onto the man as if daring him to try something. Logan exhaled, glancing around the warehouse, at the children, now safe, at the agents securing the last of the criminals. It was over. Outside, the once still night erupted with noise, sirens, radios crackling, the hushed cries of the rescued children as they were wrapped in blankets and carried to safety. Logan stood at the entrance, watching as the youngest girl, the one who had reached for Maximus first, was cradled by a paramedic. She turned, her eyes searching. "Doggy?" she whispered. Logan looked down at Maximus. The dog had returned to his side, standing tall, his expression unreadable. Logan smiled softly. "He's right here, sweetheart." The little girl nodded, as if that was all the reassurance she needed. Then she let herself be taken to safety. Logan swallowed the lump in his throat, staring up at the night sky. The weight that had pressed on him for years, the guilt, the pain, the loss, felt lighter now. For the first time in a long time, he felt Clara. Not as a ghost of grief, but as something warm, something steady, a whisper in the wind, a presence beside him. He felt her watching, and he knew she was proud. He glanced down at Maximus, running a hand over the dog's scarred back. "You did good, boy," he murmured. Maximus let out a soft huff, as if to say, "We did good." And for the first time since Clara's death, since everything fell apart, Logan believed it. The house had been quiet for so long that Logan almost didn't recognize the sound at first. A giggle. Soft, sweet, unmistakably Olivia's. He froze in the hallway, his breath catching in his throat. It had been weeks since he had heard that sound. Weeks of silence, of waiting, of wondering if his daughter would ever truly come back to him. And now, just beyond her half-open bedroom door, he heard laughter. Carefully, he stepped closer, his heart pounding with cautious hope. He peeked inside. Olivia sat cross-legged on her bed, her fingers absently running through Maximus's short brindle fur. The massive Pitbull lay beside her, completely relaxed, his head resting on her lap. His eyes were half closed, content as Olivia leaned forward, whispering something softly into his ear. Maximus's tail thumped gently against the blanket, as if responding. Logan swallowed hard. For the first time in what felt like forever, Olivia looked like herself again. She was still small, still delicate, but the emptiness that had haunted her gaze was gone. In its place was something warm, something steady, something whole. She turned, noticing Logan for the first time. Her blue eyes met his, clear and full of something he had feared he would never see again. Light. "Max says that we're safe now," she whispered. Logan's throat tightened. He walked toward her, kneeling beside the bed, pulling her into his arms. He buried his face in her golden curls, inhaling the soft, familiar scent of her shampoo. His voice was thick with emotion. "Yeah, baby, we are." She hugged him back, her small hands gripping his shirt. And just like that, the weight he had been carrying for years, the grief, the guilt, the fear, finally lifted. Maximus huffed beside them, stretching his legs out, as if his job here was done. Logan let out a choked laugh, rubbing a hand over his face. He couldn't believe how much had changed in just a few short weeks. He had walked into the rescue center expecting nothing, doubting everything. But Maximus had done the impossible. He had brought Olivia back. As if sensing the shift in the room, Olivia pulled back slightly, a thoughtful look crossing her face. "Daddy?" Logan brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. "Yeah, sweetheart." Her lips pursed, serious. "Max says he needs a bigger bed." Logan blinked. "Oh, does he?" She nodded solemnly. "Yep. He says my bed is too small, and yours is much nicer." Logan narrowed his eyes at Maximus, who wagged his tail innocently. That night, when Logan climbed into bed, he found himself on the couch instead, while Maximus sprawled out comfortably on his mattress, paws stretched out like he owned the place. Olivia peeked from behind the door, giggling. "Guess we lost, Daddy," Logan groaned, shaking his head. But as he watched his daughter smile again, truly smile, he realized something. For the first time in years, they had actually won. Some scars are visible, etched into flesh, telling stories of survival. Others are hidden, buried deep in the heart, shaping the way we see the world. For Logan and Olivia, and for Maximus, healing was never about erasing the past. It was about finding the strength to move forward. They were three souls, all wounded, all lost. But together, they found something greater than what they had lost. A second chance. And isn't that what life is truly about? As Nelson Mandela once said, "The greatest glory in living lies not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall." If this story touched you, if it made you feel something, let us know in the comments. And if you want to hear more stories that move, inspire, and challenge the way we see love, loss, and courage, subscribe to Veil Marks. Your support helps us create more powerful stories, and with every new subscriber, we get one step closer to sharing these lessons with the world. Because some stories aren't just meant to be told, they're meant to be felt.